roundup, starting with Sakamoto Days by Yuto Suzuki. This week's chapter was chapter 61, titled Pretty Decent. Now, before we get into the summary and the review, let's talk about last week's last panel. What did we see? Kanaguri blows up the plane. Now, listen up, all you assassins. This is a movie. Let's get into the summary. It literally picks up right from that last panel. Like, I'm not even playing.
For real.
Like the same dialogue too. Kanaguri just blew up the plane. We see that the head test admin, this is actually the first time we see any of the other administrators, right? The head test admin, whose name is Usami, is concerned that the fallout from this is going to mean his head is on the chopping block, right? Now, while one of the other admins who's carrying Mizuno, and it's also important to note that most of the admins have parachutes. This admin points out that he was against hiring Kanaguri in the first place. Then we see another admin, Miss Ato, suggests that instead of this, being a whole crapshoot, that they spin it, right? They spin it so it becomes like, hey, turns out this was always part 2 of the exam. Anyway, Kanaguri isn't just acting like a rogue. We wanted this the whole time, right? We then switch over to our boy Scarface Glasses. And this is not the first time we've seen this ancillary character make an appearance. And I got a note on that when I get into the review. But his text bubbles basically let us know it's like, all right, they basically have 2 minutes before they hit the surface, right? Whether it's water or the island that they're expected to land on, right? We then switch over.
Had approximates.
Yeah, he did. Now I'm like, we also need to talk about how cool of a head some of these characters are keeping while all this is transpiring. Like, they're falling at, 120 miles per hour, which, even though they haven't hit the surface yet, it's almost like they're in zero gravity, right? But that being said, right, we switch over to our main crew, right? Sakamoto, Shin, Mafuyu, aka Young Face Mask, Akira, aka Anxiety Youngster, and somehow Kill Baby. I got a note on that too. But they're being recorded by Kanaguri. He's all about his footage, and he's trying to see how his protagonist, Akira, is handling this situation, right? Sakamoto makes a beeline for him against gravity, mind you. So the way I pictured it, and I could be wrong, it's like, obviously based on his camera angle, Kanaguri is still higher up compared to everyone else, which is interesting considering like he's the one who blasted the hole in the plane, like, but whatever. Right, that's neither here nor there.
The last one to fly out the plane.
Yeah, but he's above them, and he's just like recording how everyone's like handling this current crisis, right? Now, Sakamoto makes a beeline for him by inhaling all this air, puffing up his cheeks, puffing himself up, and like basically just like an instant burst, right? Instant burst up to where Kanaguri is located. He uses a kick to essentially distract him while he snatches away the bullets that they'll need, right? Because now the conditions for the second part are, yes, you need to land safely onto the island, but in order for you to pass, you also need to have a bullet, right? So he snatches away these bullets. Now they don't have to worry about the bullets, and they can focus all their energy on figuring out how to land. Again, talk about keeping a cool head, and we now see Akira's real potential. She's basically a genius level seamstress, right? She's quickly sews up a parachute from everyone's clothing, and they're able to slow their descent into the water. Now, skipping ahead to the last panel, we basically see they've landed safely. Sakamoto kind of gave her a bullet because like, yo, at this point, you deserve this. You saved us out of a tight spot. This is all yours, right? But the last panel is basically like a Sakamoto thought bubble saying like, what's the deal with this girl? And we see a smiling Akira still kind of soaking wet from, the whole landing in the water and then making their way to the beach, right? Now, going on to my review, I feel like I really enjoyed how the test administrator, Usami, was like super aloof. And Matt pointed this out last episode, but they really don't, I want to say the author, Yuto Suzuki, really doesn't cheap out even if the character seems to be secondary or ancillary, if you will, right? Because like, all these character designs were unique, and I really liked it. Shout out to Mizuno. Like the last 2 episodes, I've been pointing out, like, where's Mizuno? Did she make it? And we see that one administrator is like holding her as they like parachute to safety, but Mizuno is confirmed alive and kicking. That's good. And yeah, the fact that all the participants are out here fighting for their lives and this test admin and Usami is just worried about keeping his job is just funny. Shout out to Atto, who also seems to be like the head of their PR or situation. At least she's below Usami, but she's the one who comes up with the idea of like spinning it to be like, hey, we wanted this whole, this was all part of our plan to have a second part to this test. Shin immediately reading that other admin who did have a parachute, by the way, but reading that other admin's mind and discovering that it wasn't planned at all was, as usual, hilarious. I want to say, yeah, Kill Baby is still alive. Now, if you're wondering why I'm saying that, cut back to when he complained to Mizuno about the spatula and she just slashed his throat, right? Now, he's alive, but if you look at the imagery, you'll notice that he does have quite a bit of bandaging around his neck, right? So he probably just bandaged, gave himself some first aid at some point. But I don't know, the way that wound was delivered to him, it didn't look like he was supposed to make it. But that's neither here nor there. He still serves his purpose as comic relief. Now, speaking of comic relief, Mafuyu was pretty much useless this chapter. Like all he did was cry the whole time. But it also made me think like he might actually just be the youngest participant in this transfer exam, all things considered. He's only 14. We haven't seen any other like youngsters show up here. And you know the age range for this transfer exam is just massive. I feel like this manga deserves an anime purely on the strength of animating Sakamoto's cheeks. Like the whole chapter,
they always get
they were always animated because of like, you know, they're falling. So obviously like that wind pressure, that air pressure is like making them ripple. But it's just, there has yet to be a chapter where his cheek doesn't do something funny. I think we need to talk about Kanaguri in this sense too. And while I was reading the chapter, it just hit me what the graphic was on the side of his head. It's a film spool. I didn't realize that until later. I thought it was like some type of reticle, like you might see like in a I don't know if is reticle the right word, but basically like you know how you might see in a sniper scope. I thought it was something like that, but I think it's just a film spool. Like you know, like the old school projectors, like how they have those spools of films. I think that's what it is. But the fact that he was like Sakamoto does not seem to be a problem to him, right? He blocked the kick and repelled Sakamoto while still holding the camera angle, right? He wasn't concerned at all. But I mean, that Sakamoto's whole point was just like focus on getting the bullets, right? He's purely fixated on the protagonist in Anxiety Youngster, aka Akira, right? Sakamoto thinking that his apron was enough to make a parachute was just funny. The dude immediately like just sank through the sky. But yeah, no, this was a cool chapter in that we saw Akira's primary skill set. Her wheelhouse is sewing. Also, it was cool to see that Sakamoto and Shin, like in this time of crisis, were like, okay, she's got something that can help us. Just don't even think, hand her the cloth that she needs, right? And then Kill Baby taking it too far was funny too, like again, comic relief. But I think we need to consider a few things, right? For one, when she's actually in her element, sewing all that stuff together in like a free fall, the artwork is so sharp. But again, like she's sewing this all together while they're falling at 120 miles per hour, 20,000 feet up, which is probably like even less now since they've been falling for a little bit, in like the span of 2 pages, like 2 or 3 pages. That's hella fast. And then shout out to Scarface Glasses for kind of giving us that exposition. And the first time we see him is actually, because I was looking back at a few chapters just to see a little bit more on Akira's backstory, because she had talked about her parents discouraging her from becoming an assassin. I wanted to find that chapter again. But we see Scarface Glasses back in chapter 57 when he was talking about like, you know, admins versus bullets, so on and so forth. Again, another, like he's a character who's been used twice, not just for exposition. But another thing that's wild too, it's like, again, she's doing this in zero gravity while they're falling toward the surface, but all clothes aren't made the same way. These are clothes and they all have different materials associated with them. Like you can't assume that Kill Baby's jeans, like Mafuyu's like sweater or whatever, like there was a leather, like Akira's leather jacket, she's sewing them all together, right? That's pretty with wild.
Just a needle.
With like, just a needle. And like, how did she have enough thread? That's neither here nor there. But just to impress upon you all like how wild that is to be able to do that given the circumstances. She totally did use Kill Baby's pants in the parachute, by the way. Like, even though she was like, you did too much, she did use his clothes.
Bro was wilding.
He 100%. When Sakamoto shook the water off of his cheek when they were like on the beach, that was hilarious. But apparently his slides are just undefeated. He didn't lose a slide. Did you notice that? Like they came out the water.
He never loses a slide, bro.
And then it looks like she's finally piqued Sakamoto's interest. Like he's starting to see, like, wait, there's more to her than meets the eye. And you know, you and I have both been talking about her in the sense that there's a reason why she's in here. She's got to have some type of ability, right? The flashback about her being told to fix a button and forget the assassin stuff is interesting. I wouldn't say like she has an abusive background. It just seems like her dreams were never supported, right? Like if you go back to chapter 58, my parents say I'd make a better housekeeper than assassin. It kind of makes me think, and I'm gonna throw this theory out here right now because that's what we do, right? It makes me think that maybe she comes from a family of assassins who could be considered elite, and she's the black sheep, right? That being said, they all landed on the island, right? And they've all passed except for Kill Baby, who's like, I'm just happy to be alive. But Kanaguri is still a problem, but he's not a problem for right now. They've effectively passed the test. Now it's time for them to go back to the next phase of the original mission, right? Which was to what? Find more information on Slur, and by extension, maybe figuring out who the next recruit is going to be for Slur. All in all, I'm hyped for the next chapter. What were your thoughts, Matt?
I thought it was an exciting chapter all the way around. Sakamoto Days very rarely has delivered a bad chapter, and I can't really think of an actual bad chapter.
This is 61 chapters deep, y'all.
61 chapters deep. Again, you know, recency bias and stuff like that, but it never, I'm never laboring through Sakamoto Days.
Right.
And there's some manga that I love that I've labored through some chapters, you know? I enjoyed, like you were saying, all of the animation of the cheeks and stuff like that. And honestly, like the entire chapter takes place in a free fall.
Yes.
So it's just one of those things where the whole time I was looking at it, I also thought it was funny, was like, she has this skill to sew all of these random ass materials together while falling 120 miles an hour, essentially to her death, but she can't fucking swim.
That's good. That is good juxtaposition.
I was like, wait, what? And she's like, yeah, she can't swim. Like, you know, Sakamoto pulled out the water and stuff, but
still in his slides.
Still in his slides, of course. Now, but the one thing I will say though is I thought it was interesting when they showed her background and showed like the blacked out face, and that could have just been a panel and just been like, it doesn't matter who that person is, you know? It could have been a situation where who that person wasn't as important as just the message, or on the flip side of that, it could be that that person is gonna matter. You know what I'm saying? Nothing is for nothing.
Right.
You know, nothing is happening in this series for no reason. So I'm definitely curious to see how it'll go. I'm curious to see what's going to happen in the next chapter. And I'm so far just really, really kind of enjoying this, I guess you could say, tournament-esque arc or whatever is happening. I mean, you know, most anime, at least that have this sort of format, they go to this point at some point. But I thought it was really cool. I thought it was really cool having it be like just the whole way that this setup happened.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? The plane gets blown up. They're all falling out of the plane. But before that, there's pretty much like a free for all on the plane. You know what I'm saying? So I thoroughly enjoyed it. And, you know, it's yet again another chapter that just has me really excited to see what's going to happen next week. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much the long and short of it, because you hit most of the stuff on the head.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts before we move on?
Not too late to jump on the Sakamoto train. I'm gonna do it every week at this point.
Yeah, we got to.
It's not too late. 61 chapters deep. If you haven't done it, do it. It's worth it. Like you will be taken by surprise.
I feel like if you got time to listen to the podcast, you got time to read Sakamoto Days. 100%. Just read a chapter. Just read a chapter.
You're gonna read it and you're gonna be like, what is this artwork? This is like, man. And then you will get to that one panel where you'll just be like, what? And if that doesn't hook you, maybe Sakamoto isn't for you. But for most of us, that's what hooked us. It'll hook you to get in on this. No other